The great chamber of the Imperial Council was filled with light from tall windows of crystal. The walls were covered in banners of old victories, and the floor shone like silver. Around the circle sat the leaders of the empire, each wearing robes of power and pride. They had ruled for centuries, crushing smaller races with little effort, and they believed nothing in the galaxy could ever challenge their strength. In the middle of the chamber stood Vaynor, one of the oldest of the council. His skin was pale, and his eyes carried the weight of many wars. He had seen more battles than any other in the room, and his voice carried with it the silence of experience. When he raised his hand, the chamber grew quiet, though not with respect. But with curiosity, Vaynor spoke slowly. He told the council that a storm was rising at the edge of the stars. Not a storm of nature, but a storm of people. He spoke of the humans, a young species who had begun to spread among the stars. He warned that they were not like the other races the Empire had conquered. They were not stronger in body, not faster, not more advanced. Yet they had something the Empire did not understand. The council laughed at first. One of the generals leaned forward and called humans a fragile race of flesh and bone, not worth the attention of an empire that had ships spanning 1,000 systems. Another shouted that humans were nothing but children playing at war, a race too young to stand against real power. Their voices were full of pride, and they mocked Vaynor for wasting their time with such stories. But Vaynor did not stop. He spoke. Again, louder this time, and his words shook even those who tried not to listen. He told them of battles where humans fought until the last soldier, refusing to surrender even when defeat was certain. He told them of human history, of wars on their own world that had burned entire nations, yet from the ashes, humans always rose again. He said humans had a spirit that could not be broken, and that spirit was more dangerous than any weapon. He reminded the council that the Empire had crushed many worlds because their enemies lost hope. But humans did not know how to lose hope. They could be beaten, but they would rise again, and each time they would return stronger, more determined, and more dangerous. The council chamber filled with murmurs. Some laughed again, but others began to shift uneasily in their seats. One commander asked how a small race like humans could ever stand against the firepower of the Empire. Vaynor answered with a calm voice. He said the Empire would win battles. Yes, but humans would turn every loss into a lesson. They would fight with anger and with love, with rage and with loyalty. And when the Empire thought it had destroyed them, the humans would strike back with a fury no one could stop. He looked around the chamber, his old eyes resting on each leader in turn. He told them plainly that to attack humans would be the greatest mistake the Empire could make. He warned them that if they pushed humanity into war, they would not only lose soldiers and ships. They would lose their empire, their cities, their pride, and their very place in the galaxy. He said that if humans were forced to rise in full war, they would burn the Empire to ashes, and history would remember only their fire. For a long moment, there was silence. The council did not know whether to dismiss him or to fear his words. Then the High Chancellor laughed, a deep and proud laugh that echoed through the chamber. He declared that the Empire had stood for thousands of years, that no young race could ever threaten its rule. He told Vaynor that his warning was nothing but the ramblings of an old soldier who had seen too many battles. The other council members followed his laughter. Their voices filled the chamber once more, mocking Vaynor and speaking of new conquests. They spoke of humans as if they were prey waiting to be hunted. Plans were already whispered of fleets to send and colonies to seize. But Vaynor did not laugh. He stood in silence, his eyes dark with sorrow. He had given his warning, and he knew it would not be heard. He looked at the banners on the walls, the banners of empires crushed before, and he wondered if soon those same walls would be covered in the ashes of his own people. When the council dismissed him, He walked slowly out of the chamber, his steps heavy as though carrying the weight of the future. He knew the Empire's pride was too strong. They would not listen until it was too late. The humans would be tested, and when they were tested, the Empire would pay a price greater than it could imagine. As he left the Great Hall, Vaynor whispered words to himself that none of the council heard. He said that the humans were not the storm. The storm was the arrogance of the Empire itself, and when the storm finally broke, it would be the humans who stood in the fire, unbroken and unafraid. The stars were calm and endless when the human ship Horizon moved through the border of known space. The ship was not large, but it was strong and well-armed. Its hull carried scars of old battles, yet it sailed with quiet pride. Inside, the crew worked with steady hands, each person knowing that far from Earth, they carried the name of humanity, Captain. Daniel Morgan stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the dark beyond the windows. He was a tall man with a calm face, a man who spoke only when needed. His crew trusted him because he never lost his voice in fear. Beside him stood Lieutenant Claire Lewis, sharp-eyed and quick, always ready to give a report. At the navigation station sat Ensign Ryan Carter, younger than most, but eager and brave. Together, they guided the Horizon through the quiet of space. The quiet did not last. Alarms rang as Ryan picked up a signal. Ships were approaching, not human ships, but vessels of the alien empire. The screen showed their sharp outlines, dark and vast, moving like shadows across the stars. The crew grew tense. This was no friendly meeting. Claire spoke quickly, reading the signals. The aliens demanded that the humans stop their ship. They claimed the humans were trespassing in the Empire's territory. The demand was not only sharp, it was insulting. It was clear the aliens believed they had full power here. Daniel listened in silence. Then he told Ryan to open a channel. The screen lit up, and the face of an alien commander appeared. His skin was dark silver, his eyes cold, his voice heavy with pride. He spoke as if he were speaking to a child. He told Daniel that humans were not welcome beyond their own small world. He said the Horizon must lower its shields and prepare to be taken. The bridge fell silent as the aliens' voice echoed through the room. Daniel did not answer at once. He looked at his crew, at their tense faces, and then he spoke with calm strength. He told the alien commander that humanity was free, and no empire would ever chain it. He said Earth did not kneel, and no human ship would ever lower its flag to another power. His voice was steady, not loud, but strong enough to carry across the stars. The alien commander narrowed his eyes. He laughed, a harsh sound, and called humans fools. He promised that the Empire would crush them as it had crushed many others. He gave Daniel one last chance to surrender, but Daniel only stood taller. He repeated his words, saying humans would never bow. The screen went dark. The alien fleet moved closer. On the bridge of the Horizon, Claire gave orders to raise shields. Ryan's hands moved quickly over the controls, guiding the ship into position. The crew was ready for battle, though they knew the enemy was stronger. Daniel's voice cut through the tension. He told them that the Empire might think humans were weak, but they would show the truth. He said they were not fighting only for their own ship, but for Earth and for every colony that depended on them. His words filled the crew with courage. And fear gave way to determination. The alien ship surrounded the Horizon. Bright lines of fire cut through space as the first shots were fired. The human ship shook, but held firm. The crew worked without panic, answering each strike with their own fire. The Horizon was smaller, but it was faster and more clever in its movements. The aliens had power, but the humans had skill. The battle raged across the border of space. Claire called out enemy positions. Ryan guided the ship through deadly fire, and Daniel gave each order with calm precision. The horizon slipped through gaps, striking where the aliens were weakest, avoiding the traps they had prepared. It was not an easy fight, but the humans refused to give ground. Finally, after long minutes of fire and fury, the alien ships slowed. They had expected an easy capture, but the horizon had survived. Worse, the small human ship had struck back hard enough to damage their pride. The alien commander's face returned to the screen, his voice colder now. He told Daniel that this was not the end. He promised the Empire would return with greater force, and that Earth would pay for this insult. Daniel only looked at him without fear. He said that if the Empire returned, they would find humanity waiting. He ended the channel before the alien could answer. The alien fleet pulled back, leaving the horizon scarred but alive. The bridge was quiet again, filled with the hum of the ship and the breathing of its crew. They knew this was only the beginning. The Empire had seen that humans would not bend, and now war was certain. Daniel looked out at the stars, his voice low but clear. He told his crew that the warning had been given, and now humanity must be ready. The Empire believed it could crush them, but it did not yet understand what Vaynor had already seen. Humans would not break. And soon, the galaxy would learn what that truly meant. The Empire did not wait long after the first clash with the horizon. Their pride was wounded, and their leaders were furious. To them, the idea that a single human ship had stood against their fleet was shameful. They believed the only answer was to strike quickly and crush humanity before the story of resistance could spread. So the Empire gathered a great force and sent it against one of the human colonies at the edge of known space. The colony was not large, but it was home to thousands of families. The people lived in simple houses with farms and workshops, never expecting to face war. They believed space battles were far away, fought by fleets and admirals. But when the alien ships appeared in the skies, they learned how close war could come. The humans on the colony had only a small defense force. Among them was Corporal Jason Brooks, a strong soldier with sharp eyes, and Sergeant Linda Harris, a woman known for her steady courage. They had trained for danger, but they had never faced an enemy like this. When the alien ships landed and troops poured out, many thought the colony would fall in a single day. The aliens moved with confidence. Their weapons were heavy and advanced, their armor dark and shining. They believed the battle was already won, but they did not know the spirit of the people they were attacking. Jason and Linda gathered the soldiers and warned the colonists. They told everyone that surrender was not an option. If the colony fell, Earth would lose not just ground but hope. The battle began in the streets. The humans fought with rifles and grenades, using every wall and doorway as cover. The aliens marched forward in formation, expecting the humans to scatter. But the humans did not scatter. They fought from the shadows, striking and vanishing. Forcing the enemy to chase them through narrow alleys and broken ground, Jason led a small squad into the heart of the colony. They set traps in the buildings, collapsing walls onto alien patrols, cutting off their escape. Linda held the central square with a handful of soldiers, refusing to give ground even as the aliens came in waves. Her voice never shook as she shouted orders, guiding her people with calm fire. The aliens grew frustrated. Each time they thought they had cornered the humans, another ambush struck them from behind. They were used to enemies who fled at the first sign of defeat, but these humans fought harder the longer the battle lasted. Even when wounded, they refused to fall back. Even when outnumbered, they refused to surrender. Night fell, and the colony burned in places, but the humans still held. Families who could not fight helped in other ways, carrying supplies, treating the wounded, and passing ammunition to the soldiers. Everyone had a role, and no one gave up. The colony became a fortress, and every street turned into a battlefield. In the early hours of the next day, the aliens launched a final push. They believed the humans must be exhausted, but they found only more resistance. Jason and his squad struck from rooftops, raining fire down on enemy troops. Linda stood in the square, rallying her soldiers with words that burned hotter than fear. She told them they were not only fighting for themselves, but for every human who lived under the shadow of the Empire. The aliens lost more soldiers than they expected. Their commanders grew uneasy. They had thought the colony would be theirs in a few hours, but now they were trapped in a long and bloody fight. Whispers began among the alien troops that the humans were not like others they had conquered. The memory of Vayner's warning spread quietly, even among the enemy ranks. When the Empire's ships finally pulled back to regroup, the colony still stood. The humans were battered and tired, their numbers smaller, but they had not fallen. Smoke rose into the sky, but the flag of Earth still waved above the square. Jason sat with his squad, his face covered in dust, his rifle still in his hands. He knew the battle was not over. The Empire would return, and next time with even greater force. But he also knew something else. The aliens had seen the truth. Humanity would not break easily. Linda walked among the wounded, giving comfort with quiet words. She felt the same truth deep in her heart. The Empire believed it could crush them, but each fight only made the humans stronger. Each victory, no matter how small, proved that humanity could stand against giants far above the colony. In the safety of their ships, the alien commanders met in silence. They had lost too many soldiers for a battle that was supposed to be simple. They began to wonder if Vayner's warning had been more than the words of an old fool. They had seen the fire of humans with their own eyes, and they feared what might happen if that fire spread across the stars. But the Empire's pride was still too great to stop. They would not retreat, not yet. They would prepare larger fleets, greater armies, and bring war to every human world. They still believed they could end humanity, but deep inside, they carried the first seeds of doubt. On the colony, the humans prepared for the next fight. They repaired their walls, tended their wounded, and buried their dead with honor. Captain Daniel Morgan received word of their survival and knew this was only the beginning. The Empire had made its move, and now humanity would answer. The invasion had begun, but so had the true test of what it meant to be human. The news of the colony's survival spread quickly across human space. What was supposed to be a story of defeat became a story of courage. Families spoke of Jason Brooks and Linda Harris, who had stood their ground when the Empire thought they would fall in a single day. People repeated the story with pride, and in every colony, men and women prepared themselves for the battles to come. On Earth, leaders met in long halls filled with maps and reports. They knew the Empire would not stop. The attack on the colony was only the beginning. The humans had two choices: to hide and wait for the Empire to crush them piece by piece, or to strike back while they still had strength. The choice was clear. Humanity would not wait to be broken. Admiral Laura Mitchell was chosen to lead the counterattack. She was a woman with sharp eyes and a calm mind, respected by every officer who had ever served under her. She was not known for loud speeches, but for her clear orders and unshakable resolve. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of command without the need for force. Her fleet gathered in the cold dark of space. Ships of every kind came together: warships, patrol ships, and even older vessels refitted for battle. The crews were a mix of veterans and young recruits, united by the same fire. They knew the Empire had more ships and greater power, but they also knew that if they struck wisely, it could show the enemy that humans were not prey to be hunted. The target was an alien outpost that supplied fuel and weapons to the Empire's nearby fleets. It was a stronghold deep in enemy space, but Laura knew it was the heart of their power in that region. If the humans destroyed it, the Empire's armies would be slowed, their supply lines broken, and their pride wounded even further. The fleet moved quietly, using the dark between the stars as cover. Every officer on board knew the danger. If they were discovered too soon, the Empire could crush them before they reached the outpost. But Laura's careful planning guided them forward. Finally, the outpost appeared on their screens. It was massive, built like a fortress, with weapons covering every side. Around it moved alien patrols, ships ready to protect it from any threat. The humans knew this would not be an easy fight. Laura stood on the bridge of her flagship and gave her orders with calm precision. The fleet split into smaller groups, each moving in a different direction. Some drew the alien patrols away, while others slipped closer to the outpost. The humans moved fast, striking at the weak points instead of wasting fire on the strongest walls. The first blasts lit up the darkness, and the battle began. Human ships darted between enemy fire, their smaller size and faster engines, giving them an advantage. Alien ships fought back with heavy weapons, but they were slower and less flexible. What they had in strength, the humans answered with speed and clever tactics. Inside the outpost, alarms rang as systems failed. Storage tanks of fuel exploded, sending fire through the structure. Weapons that were meant to defend the Empire now turned into targets for human fire. Each strike weakened the outpost more, until it was clear the humans were not just raiding. They were breaking the heart of the Empire's supply lines. The alien commanders could not believe what they were seeing. For centuries, no race had dared to strike so deep into their territory. But here was a human fleet, small yet relentless, refusing to back away even when outnumbered. They realized too late that humans did not fight only with ships and weapons. They fought with stubborn courage, with a will that ignored the odds. Admiral Laura Mitchell gave her final command. All ships targeted the core of the outpost. With a burst of fire, the human fleet struck together, and the fortress collapsed in flames. The explosion lit up the stars, a bright fire that could be seen across the system. When the smoke cleared, the human fleet was battered but alive. They had lost ships, they had lost people, but they had achieved what the Empire thought impossible. They had taken the fight into enemy space and won. Asterisk. Laura stood on the bridge, her face calm, though her heart was heavy with the weight of sacrifice. She knew this victory was only one step in a long war. But she also knew it would echo across the galaxy. The Empire had been shown that humans could strike back and strike hard, far away, in alien halls. Commanders argued in anger and fear. Some demanded even greater armies to crush the humans once and for all. Others, in quiet voices, wondered if Vayner's warning had been the truth. They refused to hear. The fear of humans began to spread, carried in whispers through the Empire's ranks. On Earth and in the colonies, hope rose like fire. Families who had lived in fear now believed they could stand. Soldiers trained harder, ships were built faster. And everywhere, the name of humanity grew stronger. The humans were no longer waiting for the Empire to attack. They were fighting back. And the galaxy was beginning to see what that truly meant. The outpost lay in ruins, its ashes drifting through the void. It was the first great wound the humans had given to the Empire, but it would not be the last. The war was changing, and the Empire was learning that a people who refused to kneel could never be broken. Asterisk, the ruins of the destroyed outpost sent shockwaves through the Empire. For the first time in centuries, their enemies had not only defended themselves, but struck deep into their territory and won. The Empire had always told its people that no one could stand against them. But now, a small human fleet had proved them. Wrong whispers began to spread among the alien soldiers. Some spoke in hushed voices about the humans' strange will to fight. They told stories of battles where humans refused to surrender even when surrounded. They spoke of colonies where men and women fought with broken weapons, using traps and fire when they had nothing else. These stories grew larger each time they were told, and soon fear spread faster than truth. On one alien warship, soldiers sat in silence after hearing about the loss of the outpost. One asked another how it was possible that a young race with fewer ships could do such damage. The other replied that humans did not fight for orders or for empire, but for something deeper. They fought for families, for freedom, and for each other. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. They had crushed many races before, but none had fought like this. Meanwhile, in the Empire's capital, the council grew restless. Some leaders demanded that the humans be destroyed with overwhelming force. Others, though fewer in number, remembered Vaynar's warning and wondered if they were walking into disaster. The council chambers echoed with anger, but behind their proud voices lay the first seeds of doubt. In the human colonies, the story was different. The victory gave people new hope. Where once they had been afraid of the Empire's endless power, now they believed they could fight back. Children played games where they pretended to be soldiers defending their homes. Farmers volunteered to carry weapons. Engineers worked day and night to repair old ships and make them ready for war. The spirit of resistance grew stronger every day. Captain Daniel Morgan on the horizon felt the change in his crew as well. Where before there had been tension and fear, now there was determination. Ryan Carter moved with new confidence at the controls, and Claire Lewis spoke with sharper fire in her voice. They all knew the war was far from over, but they also knew the Empire had seen their strength. Across the galaxy, more battles followed. Some colonies fell, but none without fierce resistance. Alien commanders began to notice something troubling. Every time the humans lost, they came back stronger. Every defeat became a lesson. Every wound became a reason to fight harder. It was as if the humans carried an endless fire inside them, a fire no battle could put out. One alien officer who had fought on the front lines wrote a secret report to his superiors. He admitted that humans frightened him. He described how a single wounded soldier had held off an entire squad, fighting until his last breath just to buy time for his friends to escape. The officer wrote that he had never seen such will before, not in any race the Empire had conquered. His report was hidden by his commanders, but copies spread in secret. Feeding the fear, Admiral Laura Mitchell continued to lead her fleet through enemy space. She chose her battles carefully, striking at supply lines, communication centers, and weak points. The humans never wasted strength on hopeless attacks, but when they struck with precision. Each victory, even small ones, chipped away at the Empire's power and pride. Alien citizens began to whisper in their markets and streets. Mothers told their children stories of human soldiers who rose from the ashes like fire spirits. Workers wondered if their empire had finally met an enemy it could not break. Fear grew not only among soldiers, but also among the people who had always trusted the Empire's strength. Back in the Empire's council chamber, Vayner watched silently as the leaders argued. His old eyes saw the fear behind their proud words. He had warned them, and now his warning was becoming truth, but they still would not listen. They believed that by sending even larger fleets, they could crush the humans. They could not yet. See that the larger the fire they tried to stamp out, the stronger it would burn. On a quiet night aboard the Horizon, Daniel Morgan stood by the window of his ship. He looked at the stars and thought of Earth, of the people waiting for news, of the soldiers like Jason Brooks and Linda Harris fighting on the ground. He knew the war would be long and filled with loss, but he also knew something the Empire had not yet learned. Fear could spread in many ways, and while fear of the Empire had once ruled the galaxy, Now it was fear of the humans that was spreading instead, and fear could be more powerful than any weapon. The Empire had built its rule on the belief that none could stand against it. But with every battle, with every victory, and even with every loss, humanity was proving that belief false. The fire of resistance was spreading, and soon the Empire would learn that fear of humanity was no longer just a whisper. It was becoming a truth carved into every soldier's heart. The humans were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting to survive, to live free, and that made them more dangerous than any empire could understand. The war had dragged on for months. Both humans and the Empire had suffered, but the Empire was growing restless. Their armies had marched into battle again and again, yet the humans never gave up. Each time the Empire thought the war would end, the humans struck back with new strength. The Council wanted a final victory, something so large it would end human resistance forever. The Empire chose a stronghold deep within their territory as the place to trap humanity. It was a city built into a massive fortress filled with weapons and guarded by fleets. It was where the Empire kept records of its conquests, its maps of every world it ruled, and secrets of how it had crushed so many races before. To the Empire, it was untouchable, but to the humans, it was a chance. Admiral Laura Mitchell studied the reports and maps with care. She saw that the stronghold was not only a symbol of Empire power, but also the heart of its communication network. If humans could capture it, they would gain not only a victory, but also the knowledge hidden inside. Laura knew it would not be easy, but she also knew the time had come for a strike that could change the war. Her fleet moved with silence, avoiding patrols and slipping past defenses. The journey was long and filled with danger, but every soldier on board knew what was at stake. Captain Daniel Morgan and his crew on the horizon joined the mission, their ship flying at the edge of the formation. Jason Brooks and Linda Harris, hardened now by countless battles, led squads on the ground, ready for the moment when the fleet would land troops. When the human ships arrived, the battle began like a storm. The Empire's fleet rushed to defend the stronghold, filling space with fire. But Laura's fleet had grown smarter. They no longer fought like they had at the start of the war. Now, they struck with precision, slipping past heavy ships, cutting through supply lines, and forcing the Empire to spread its strength thin. Amid the chaos, human troops landed on the surface of the fortress world. Jason and Linda led the charge through the narrow streets, guiding their squads with skill born from hardship. The aliens fought hard, but the humans were relentless. Every corner, every building became a battlefield. The aliens were defending their pride, but the humans were fighting for survival. And that gave them the edge. Daniel and his crew pushed through the fortress walls and reached the archives. Inside were endless chambers filled with records. They found maps showing not just human worlds, but the history of every race the Empire had destroyed. They saw proof of how many civilizations had once stood proud. Before being reduced to ashes, Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. He realized that if humanity lost this war, they too would become nothing more than a line in these archives, a forgotten race destroyed by arrogance. He refused to let that happen. He sent the data back to Laura and ordered his crew to broadcast the message across human space. The people needed to see the truth that the Empire had crushed countless worlds before. But humanity would not be one of them. ****. The fight for the stronghold lasted through the night. Human soldiers held their ground even when outnumbered. Linda rallied her squad in the central square, shouting that they were fighting not just for themselves, but for every free world yet to come. Jason charged through enemy lines, his squad following close, breaking the last defenses that stood before the archives. When dawn came, the fortress was in flames. The Empire's banners fell from the walls, and for the first time, the humans stood inside one of the Empire's greatest strongholds. It was more than a victory. It was a turning point. Across the galaxy, the message Daniel had sent spread quickly. Colonies that had once lived in fear cheered when they saw the archives. They realized the Empire was not invincible, that it was built on centuries of cruelty and fear. Now humanity had shown the galaxy that the Empire could bleed, and that its secrets could be broken. In the Alien Council, anger mixed with fear. The leaders shouted for vengeance, but their soldiers were shaken. Many had seen their friends fall in battles they should have won. Many had begun to whisper that the humans were not like any enemy before. Even those who still laughed at Vaner's warning could no longer ignore the truth. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Laura Mitchell stood in silence, looking out at the burning fortress. She knew the cost had been high, and she felt the weight of every life lost. But she also knew the war had changed forever. No longer were the humans only defending their homes. Now they were striking into the heart of the Empire itself. Daniel Morgan looked at the stars from the horizon and thought of Earth. He promised himself that no matter how long the war lasted, no matter how heavy the burden became, he would not let humanity fall. The Empire had been warned once before, and now the warning had become reality. The humans had captured the Empire's secrets, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The fall of the fortress changed everything. What once had seemed impossible was now real. The humans were not only surviving, but tearing into the Empire's heart. For centuries, the Empire had believed itself unshakable, but now its people whispered in fear. Ships that once carried the Empire's banners proudly now sailed with hesitation. Soldiers who once marched with certainty now wondered if they would ever see their homes again. Admiral Laura Mitchell knew the moment had come to press harder. The humans had the enemy's maps and records. They knew where the Empire's supply lines ran, where its fleets rested, and where its cities were most vulnerable. With this knowledge, Laura prepared her fleets for strikes deeper than ever before. She was not seeking small victories now. She wanted to cripple the Empire so completely that it would never rise again to threaten humanity. The first target was a massive shipyard orbiting a red giant star. This shipyard had built countless warships for the Empire. Destroying it would be like cutting off the Empire's sword arm. Laura's fleets swept in like shadows, striking fast before the enemy could gather. Explosions shook the shipyard as fire spread through its great rings. For the first time, the Empire was losing not just battles, but the very strength to rebuild. At the same time, ground forces moved through occupied worlds. Jason Brooks and Linda Harris led squads into cities that had once been symbols of alien power. Their soldiers fought street by street, burning away the fear that had ruled for so long. In one city, Jason led his squad to capture the enemy's central command tower. When it fell, the people of the city tore down the Empire's banners with their own hands. Everywhere, the story was the same. Human fleets cut the Empire's veins, while soldiers on the ground broke its hold on the planets it once ruled. The Empire's power began to crumble. Inside the Alien Council chambers, panic finally spread. Voices once full of pride now trembled with anger and fear. Some called for peace, but others shouted that peace with humans was impossible. They claimed the only way forward was total destruction of Earth. Yet their fleets were burning. Their shipyards destroyed, and their soldiers weary. The more they tried to fight, the more the humans bled them dry. The Empire's leaders remembered Vaner's warning, though few admitted it out loud. He had said that humans would rise from every defeat, stronger and more dangerous than before. Now they saw that he had spoken the truth. The humans were not just surviving. They were consuming the Empire itself, turning every victory into fuel. For greater fire, On the front lines, the fear grew sharper. Alien soldiers who once mocked humans now dreaded facing them. They had seen humans charge, even when wounded, seen them fight and fire in rubble with nothing but broken weapons. To them, the humans seemed less like flesh and bone and more like spirits of war that refused to die. Some alien commanders even began to retreat early from battles, unwilling to risk their men against such relentless enemies. Daniel Morgan and the crew of the Horizon were at the heart of these strikes. Their ship became a symbol across the human colonies, a sign that even small vessels could bring fear to the Empire's heart. Daniel's calm voice guided his crew through battles where they faced impossible odds, and each time they returned alive. Their legend grew. Admiral Laura Mitchell led the largest battle of the war when she struck at the Empire's central supply fleet. The battle lasted for days, filling the stars with fire. Human ships darted in and out, targeting fuel ships and carriers, leaving the enemy warships stranded. At the end of the battle, the Empire's fleet broke apart. Unable to fight or even feed its armies, the Empire began to collapse from within. Cities that had once sworn loyalty now rebelled. Worlds that had been forced to kneel now rose in open defiance, inspired by the humans' victories. The Empire's chains were breaking, link by link. Through it all, Vaynor watched with heavy eyes. He had tried to warn the Council, but they had laughed. Now their pride had brought them to ruin. He saw their fleets burn, their cities fall, and he knew the Empire would never return to what it once was. In his heart, he felt sorrow for his people, but also a strange respect for the humans. They had proved that spirit and will could outmatch even the greatest empire. On the battlefield, Jason Brooks stood on the ruins of a captured stronghold. He looked around at the smoke and broken walls, his rifle heavy in his hands. Beside him, Linda Harris rested, her face tired but unbroken. They both knew the war was not yet finished, but they also knew the Empire was burning, and in every shadow of that fire, in every ruined city and broken fleet, the same truth echoed. The humans had come not to conquer, but to survive, and in their survival, they had shown the galaxy the true cost of arrogance. The empire that once ruled 1,000 worlds was falling into ashes. Humanity, once dismissed as weak and fragile, now stood as the fire that could not be put out. The storm Vaynor had warned of was no longer coming. It was here. Asterisk. The war had reached its end. The empire that once stretched across countless stars now lay in ruins. Its fleets were shattered, its cities burned, and its proud leaders silenced. The banners that had flown for centuries were gone, torn down by those who once bowed to them. What remained was a broken shadow of power. Too weak to rise again, Admiral Laura Mitchell stood aboard her flagship, staring out at the empty stars where the last great battle had been fought. The wreckage of ships still drifted, silent reminders of the struggle. Around her, the crew worked quietly, their faces tired but filled with a deep sense of victory. Laura knew the war had cost much. Thousands of lives had been lost, and Earth's colonies bore scars that would last for generations. But she also knew they had done what no one believed possible. They had brought the empire to its knees. Jason Brooks and Linda Harris were on the ground, helping the people of a liberated world. The city around them was broken, buildings lying in ruins, smoke rising in the distance. Yet the streets were alive with voices of hope. Children who once hid in fear now ran freely. Families that had been slaves now embraced each other in freedom. Jason carried food to a group of survivors, his uniform still stained from battle. Linda directed the soldiers to rebuild shelters. They were no longer just fighters. They were builders of a new tomorrow. The humans did not claim the worlds they freed. They left them to their own people, to govern as they chose. To many across the galaxy, this act was more shocking than the humans' victory. For centuries, The Empire had taken everything it touched, but the humans gave instead of taking. That simple choice changed how others saw them. Across the broken empire, whispers spread. Stories of human courage reached planets that had never even seen an Earth-born soldier. They spoke of men and women who fought not for conquest, but for survival, and who carried fire in their hearts that no empire could extinguish. Some called them saviors. Others called them destroyers. But all agreed on one thing. Humanity could never again be ignored. Vaynar, the alien who had once warned his council, lived to see the end. He stood in the quiet of his chamber, watching the news of his people's defeat. He remembered the day. He had begged them not to fight the humans, and the laughter that had answered him. Now that laughter was gone, replaced by silence and ashes. His heart was heavy with grief for the fallen, but he felt no anger toward humanity. They had only done what any people would do when threatened. He whispered to himself that he had tried, though he knew his words had never been enough. Daniel, Morgan and the crew of the Horizon returned to Earth as heroes. Their small ship had become a legend, spoken of in every colony and free world. But Daniel himself felt no pride in the word hero. As he walked down the ramp, he looked at the faces of those who welcomed him and thought only of the ones who had not come back. He had led men and women into battles where many never returned, and their absence weighed on him more than any victory. Admiral Laura Mitchell stood before the Council on Earth, giving her final report. She told them of the Empire's defeat, of the freed worlds, and of the cost humanity had paid. Her voice was steady, but her eyes revealed the burden of command. When the report was done, the Council declared the war finished. Humanity was safe. The Empire was gone, but safety did not mean peace for everyone. Many of the Empire's survivors now faced hunger and chaos. With their rulers gone, whole worlds fell into disorder. Some begged the humans to guide them, but humanity refused to become a new empire. Instead, they offered aid, teaching others how to rebuild, sharing food, and sending ships of medicine. Humanity chose a different path from conquest. Jason and Linda stayed behind on one such world. They lived among the people, helping them find strength again. Jason found joy in teaching young men how to protect their homes. Linda found hope in training women to heal the wounded. They both believed their mission was not finished, for the scars of war needed more than time to heal. Across the stars, stories of humans spread like wildfire. In markets, travelers told of soldiers who fought through fire. In temples, priests spoke of their spirit that could not be broken. On distant worlds, children played at being human warriors, holding sticks as if they were rifles and shouting that they would never surrender. The galaxy had changed forever. Where once the Empire's voice ruled all, now humanity's deeds echoed instead. Some feared them, some admired them, but none dismissed them anymore. Vaynar, in his last days, recorded his memories for his people. In his writings, he spoke of pride, of arrogance, and of the mistake that destroyed an empire. But he also spoke of respect. He wrote that humanity was not to be hated, but to be understood. They were survivors, builders, and fighters. They were a storm that came when least expected, and those who ignored them would pay the price. When his writings were found years later, it became a lesson for the galaxy. Never again would another power rise and look down on Earth as weak. Never again would the warning be ignored. As Earth rebuilt, the stars seemed brighter. Ships sailed not to conquer, but to explore. Humanity had proved its place in the galaxy, not as rulers, but as survivors who could never be broken. And in the ruins of the Empire, in the ashes that once formed a mighty crown, the truth remained clear. The aliens' warning had been right. Never attack the humans, or they would burn your empire to ashes. Asterisk.